So by the time this YouTube video is uploaded, we might have ourselves some new information when it comes to the Detroit Red Wings. Now, I am recording this audio on the night of Wednesday, November 5th, as per usual with the show and its format. So if there is any Patrick Kane updates or whatever, we might not be able to get to that in this particular video. But what I did want to talk about for the Detroit Red Wings was a specific conversation that was brought up on the latest episode of The Sheet with Jeff Merrick and Greg Wyszynski. Now, they also had Shayna Goldman on the episode from Tuesday, and this is an episode that I'd highly recommend you go out there and listen to. And the reason we are making this video is because of what was talked about on that episode. Now, they speak about NHL awards voting. And that is one of the biggest angles in the program because, if you'd been paying attention to our show here, Greg Wyszynski posted an article on November 4th talking about the early NHL awards watch. And they expanded a little bit more on the guys that were named in the episode. This is kind of a sneak preview, but we're talking about the Hart Trophy and how Jack Eichel, Cale Makar, Mark Scheifele, they were named the 1, 2, 3 out of PHWA writers who went out there and voted at the 10% mark of the season whom it is they thought deserved the Hart. But this was written about in the article too. Other players who received first place MVP votes from our panel: Leon Draisaitl, Jack Hughes, and Dylan Larkin. This is, of course, from the article posted by Wyszynski, but then you had Wyszynski, Merrick, and Goldman expanding upon this on the podcast episode. Here's a comment from the R Detroit Red Wings subreddit by Band of Gypsies that explains it all. Shayna Goldman, Merrick, and Wyszynski gave a shout out to Larkin for a name you have to put in a top 5 Hart Trophy group at the moment, given where Detroit is and how well he's playing. It was measured, but acknowledging that Dylan Larkin is the best player on a team that's making a huge run. He was incredible for Team USA at the Four Nations. He's dominating on the PK, and he's scoring a bunch. No one is saying that he's the winner right now or anything, but that he deserves recognition given where he and the team are at. Also, just generally, we got another iteration of Merrick versus Wyszynski since Greg joined the sheet with Merrick. You can't hate that. Yeah, that's a really nice extra part of it, too. The fact that Merrick versus Wyszynski was a very entertaining hockey podcast back in the 2010s, and if you missed out on that era of Sportsnet audio broadcasts, then you missed out on a pretty interesting era. Remember when the Steve Dangle podcast was sponsored primarily by Panago Pizza? Yeah, those were the days, man. Anyways, the Detroit Red Wings are in a pretty good spot in the NHL so far. And we had already spoken about this yesterday, how they're on a very unlucky stretch of PDO play, despite the fact that they are still one of the top 3 teams in the NHL in points. Or at least, they're tied for it. And the 1-0 shootout loss to Vegas the other night does not feel that bad when you actually watch the game and you see how hard they worked. It was a good game, and there's a lot to be excited for. But the Wings this season have gone on such a heater that it's gotten to a point where the top guys that are carrying throughout this heater deserve that recognition as potential MVPs. Obviously, Hart Trophy, it's MVP of the NHL. But essentially, the way it's voted is, hey, which player happened to have had success in the league this year and who happens to be the most important part of their team's success. For most of these teams near the top of the NHL, you will have one guy usually being labeled out there, and it's especially more evident once the season comes and goes. If there's a team that really doesn't perform out too well, but they're making the playoffs anyway because one guy carried them in, that guy's probably winning the Hart, just saying. No matter how many points Kucherov or McDavid or Eichel ends up putting up, a Taylor Hall forcing the Devils to make the playoffs type of story can really put voters' odds in your favor. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Detroit Red Wings are a bad team that's going to make the playoffs just because Dylan Larkin was good enough to will them through it. But for a lot of these top teams, there are maybe 1 or 2 names that pretty much take over the conversation for the Hart. Colorado's first in the league right now. Cale Makar's listed as a finalist. Winnipeg, Mark Scheifele. Jack Hughes is getting first place votes. And you have Jack Eichel. Dylan Larkin is just a cog in the machine for the Detroit Red Wings, but you could see that he's probably the biggest one. The impact he has and the energy that he plays with this season is unmatched, really. And you can tell that out of everybody who is performing on the Detroit Red Wings this year, there's nobody that has wanted this more than Dylan Larkin. The longest tenured wing at this moment in time. A guy who, when he debuted with the squad back in 2015, a decade ago, you literally had an entire era's worth of Red Wings filling up those spots. Zetterberg, Datsuk, Nyquist. You had Brad Richards in there, Nick Kronwall. These were the guys that were around when Dylan Larkin debuted, and these were the guys that slowly started to leave as the Red Wings went through their pains and losses of not making the playoffs and inevitably becoming a top drafting team. Never mind the comments that Dylan Larkin made after the Four Nations face-off. Now, with the leadership of Todd McLellan, the standard for these players, with that changing, now the Red Wings are playing much better hockey, and it's just going to keep on getting better, as we had said yesterday. Once the season continues, once they stabilize out and start getting a little luckier because they are one of the worst PDO teams in the league, indicating they're one of the unluckiest, once Patrick Kane comes back, you're really going to start seeing this team be cohesive in a way that I don't think we've seen in more than 7 or 8 years. And of course, it's not always going to continue to get better and better. There are still some aspects that will rationally smoothen themselves out. Like, Dylan Larkin is no longer on pace for 140 points on the year. He's got 18 points in 4 games. He's on pace for 106 now. Okay, whoop-de-doo, that'd still be a career high. The guy hasn't overtaken 79 points in a season ever. That's his career high. So if he gets 80, then hey, it's already the best season he's ever had, let alone 106. Yes, it's true that Dylan Larkin has sort of stopped scoring. There are more pointless games coming here and there compared to the start of the year. But hey, there are some things that are going to change. Once Patrick Kane comes back, I think the Red Wings power play is going to really start converting on their opportunities more. They're going to be able to start scoring. And Dylan Larkin, alongside of some of the other top dogs on his line, they're going to be able to pot the puck in a little bit more too. People are starting to really overreact to Emmett Finney not scoring any points in his last 5 games. Yeah, you know, he's been playing very well. He's still a rookie. He is getting the hang of the NHL game, but not getting a point in 5 games is fine. He's a 20-year-old 7th-round pick. Like, he's playing on the first line, people. He's fine. Don't overreact to Emmett Finney unless you're playing fantasy hockey and your very particular objective in acquiring Finney last week was to see him continue scoring points and getting up there on the board. Well, newsflash, it's hard for Finney to score points when the team's getting shut out against Vegas. Not because they suck, but because it was just a really hard-fought hockey game where they weren't able to score any goals. I doubt that continues, especially with the way they've been playing. But for now, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Dylan Larkin MVP conversation? What are your thoughts on his name being included on the list of Hart candidates? A guy you should acknowledge as one of the driving forces behind one of the hottest surges to start the year in the National Hockey League. Article is going to be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and read Wyszynski's piece on ESPN. We already talked about it a few days ago, but it's going to be there if you want it again. I hope you enjoyed this Mrtka 9, and bye.